Joseph Asunka, CEO of Afrobarometer, joins me now from San Francisco. Good to have you with us. First of all, it's quite an impressive range of data that you've collected when you read through the reports. Tell us how you compiled it. I imagine that must have been a challenge in a continent like Africa.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for the opportunity to share this. So Afrobarometer is a Pan-African survey research network. We operate in more than 30 countries across the continent. And as you rightly point out, we've conducted interviews of more than 350,000 interviews since 1999. We've been around for about 2 decades now, and we've been collecting this data from African citizens across the 30+ countries that we work in. And over this period, what we normally do is go literally into the villages and into the communities and into households, where we ask people to tell us their experiences, their views, and the way they evaluate issues that affect their lives. Issues about governance, democracy, the economy, and everything, the social issues that impact their lives. And so our methodology is face-to-face interviews, and what we do is we ask these people in the language that they themselves choose. Our methodology allows us to dictate that we translate every question that we have in the instrument into local languages spoken on the continent. So in each country, any language that is spoken by more than 5% of the population, we translate it into that language. And so we ask the people in the language of their choice, and we gather this data and publicize it and give it to policymakers and decision makers to act on.
Now, the data, as I mentioned, I read out a little blurb of it there. It shows that basically the number of people not experiencing hunger is going down. Number of people who are experiencing hunger many times over, well, that's going up. Why?
Yeah, you're correct. I mean, first of all, let me just back up a little and say between 2005 and 2015, there was this instance of, poverty was declining on the continent. And we can see that in our data, that between this period, poverty was actually going down, and hunger in particular, and our lack of access to food was declining during this period. But since 2016, we have seen this be taken up, and it's been moving up and up. What we believe is, even though the trend was already increasing from 2016 through 2018, but in the last round of the survey, which was conducted during the period of the COVID-19, we saw that incidence of poverty or deprivation of food had increased astronomically in many countries. And of course, your question is why. We do think that this is partly due to the effects of COVID-19, given the impact of the global pandemic that caused lots of lockdowns and inconveniences, and of course...
But hang on, let me jump in there, because the data that I compared it to, where it was going, where the number of people who are experiencing hunger is increasing, that was a period before COVID, 2014, 2015.
Correct. Yes. So that was before the COVID-19 pandemic. And so it means that poverty was already going up before the impact of the COVID-19. What we realize is that because of the COVID-19, of course, the impact of COVID-19 has caused this trend to actually increase much more steeply. And so the question is, what happened, and the impact, the incidence of poverty, why did it increase before the COVID-19 pandemic? I think that is the period where we are beginning to explore now what was driving this. Of course, we can't rule out the effects of climate change, because issues of droughts and floods, things that we have been covering in recent surveys, do show that people express that they are beginning to experience extreme weather conditions, and these extreme weather conditions are having negative effects on their livelihoods.
Now, I can also see between 2019, 2021, you asked African citizens in 34 countries if someone in your family went without enough food during the previous year. Tell us a little bit about the findings you got from that question, what they tell us.
Yeah, you're right about that. So between 2014 and 2022, as I indicated, poverty and food insecurity actually went up. And when we surveyed and asked people how often people went without food, what we recorded is that between 1 and 5 and then 2 and 5 actually reported that they have gone many times or always without food, clean water, cash income, and cooking fuel. These are the dimensions that we use in measuring our lived poverty. But just to highlight a number of data points to buttress your question. First of all, we have about 17% who said they have gone without food many times or several, or always. And then about 21% said they have gone several times without food in the past year. And food deprivation, I mean, if we zoom into the country level, we see that food deprivation is actually much higher in countries like Malawi and Niger and Zambia, where we have almost close to 80% of the population saying that they have gone without food at least once in the past year. The best performing countries, of course, are Mauritius and Morocco, but even in these countries, during the period of the COVID pandemic to date, we have seen that hunger in these countries have also started to tick up. So even in the best performing countries, as we noted earlier, the impact of COVID-19 has really had a devastating effect on incidence of hunger. So what I'll say is, in general, as you started off with the preamble, the conference taking place in Senegal certainly is very timely. And I do think, President Macky Sall's call on Africa to think about producing and feeding themselves and becoming the food baskets of the world is a call, of course, that's long overdue, because I think that as at this point, the trends in hunger on the continent is only just increasing. And our data show that this is going up and increasing much more astronomically in several countries.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for sharing your experience on this.